these games when everybody is drafted like this are always fun. They're always interesting. One thing you always see a little bit different is the leadership side of things. You know, you have some guys that all of a sudden are with some younger guys that they haven't been with all spring, and especially like up front on the offensive line, it's important that those guys communicate and help each other out, or sometimes it can be more difficult. You know, it's different for quarterbacks when they're with lines, be it good or better than they may have been used to playing with most of the spring. Same thing with receivers. If all the guys are, split up, maybe the route running is a little bit differently. The timing might be a little bit differently. So there's interesting things that can happen. There's not a lot of chances to put in a lot of different things. I know Coach would let us do that, but sometimes you got to walk the line of what you can teach a guy in one afternoon to learn, as opposed to what you've been doing. So there's chances for guys to compete, and that'll be the main thing we're looking for. But it should be a lot of fun.
I believe you got Jamal Lyles on your team. That you guys took him first. Were you interested to see how that shook out and who went first?
It's interesting. Oh no, that didn't concern me, but that particular spot. But it's interesting to see how the older guys, as a group, confer and decide on making some decisions throughout the course of the draft. And that was interesting. And I'd say most of the choices would have been very similar to what I would have made myself.
You want to go on Lyles number one?
That spot, because we're a little bit deeper at that spot, it ended up being later in the draft, and Andrew Gleichert was on our team. And so those guys up there, they decided to take Jamal, and if the other team would have taken, we would have taken Josiah, and those guys have both been working with the ones a lot. And but I think both those guys will probably get used, and they both had good springs.
Talked about the format. I know some coaches like to do just offense versus defense,
right?
First team versus second team and whatnot. Does this feel more like a real game since it's two theoretically evenly matched teams?
Well, I think the guys take it that way. I think the guys, I don't know if it's how entertaining it is for the fans, because things certainly won't be as smooth on offense. There's no way. And because there's just not so many things that you can get operating. And the same old deal. What do you want to do? How much do you want to show? Certainly that all comes into play. But again, I think the guys will have a lot of fun, and they seem to be taking it with a little bit of an edge. They want to compete against their friends and have a good time. Even the guys that are on the same line, defensive or offensive, all of a sudden they're on opposite sides, and the same old deal that hey, it's football. You're going to compete.
Now that more of these games have become televised, do coaches look at what other teams are doing in their spring games now?
I think you always look at that. I think people have. That's been for years that there's been some kind of television features on games, and I think that's always a factor. Somewhat, not entirely, but you got to think about certainly anything that you've been working on new. I don't see why many people would be doing that, showing things differently in that regard.
What are some of the characteristics of your team when you looked over how the guys drafted it? What did you notice off the bat?
As far as a particular characteristic, I think they did a pretty good job of choosing who the best, players were, what they thought were the next important things. Where Connor Cook was the first pick by the white team, and then the green team chose Trey Waynes, so they thought it was important to get a pretty good corner back there. And then their next pick was Shalik Calhoun. They also knew that they were going to have the next two picks, though. So they took two pretty good defensive guys, and then let the thing roll from there. So I can understand those picks.
What about this formatting? You've been around this a long time. I don't know how they did it at Ohio State. Was it anything similar? Or you kind of
very similar. Very similar. So where the team was split up and you were playing a game like this, yeah, very similar.
So will you be doing the play calling?
No, I'm going to let Dave do that. I'm going to be on the sideline for a change.
Headset, or are you just going to delegate?
No, I'll be in the headset.
Okay.
How's the defense going to be run?
Mike will be on the box, and Harlan will probably be upstairs. That's the way we usually are on game day. And however those guys get it sorted out, that's up to them.
Now, will the plays be strictly stuff you've worked on, or do you guys take the liberty of adding some trick plays?
No, I'm not going to divulge those kind of information.
You're not going to be forthcoming? Come on.
No. So,
What kind of spring did Chimera have?
Chimera worked a lot at fullback this year. Actually, probably worked more at fullback than he did at tight end. And I think that'll change back a little bit as we get ready and we go into camp. But it's good for him to get that kind of knowledge. So now a few of those tight ends have a good deal of fullback experience. So if needed, they're capable of getting in there in some situations.
Did Paul Lang get back to making some progress?
Yeah,
with the
Paul
healthy
Lang.
spring?
Yeah, Paul Lang improved a lot this spring. Yep.
In what ways?
Technique-wise, physically, in all the aspects that we needed to do. Did a good job.
When you look at your offensive line for this particular spring game, is it kind of working with new dance partners for some of those guys, or are they
A lot.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot.
Do they get something out of that? It's kind of almost like an emergency situation where all of a sudden you have someone new to your right. Is it?
Yeah, and again, as I mentioned earlier, it'd be interesting to see how some of the older guys respond to it. They're the ones who have to pick it up, and hey, even if they got to tell the guy next to him what he better do, that sometimes you got to do whatever it takes to make it work.
What determines the outcome? Like I said, you've done a lot of these and you've done similar format. What usually is the determining factor in which team wins that you found?
Like a lot of football games, is who makes the least amount of mistakes. Who does not have turnovers. Who has the least amount of missed assignments. Those kind of things, and you can always get some unusual mismatches in these types of games, though. And they could be anywhere, not just outside in pass routes and things. You could get some bad mismatches up front, where some younger guys are all of a sudden blocking a lot older guy, and that's where it can get interesting.
How much stock do you put in who shows under the lights? I mean, is there a lot to be said for that as far as what these guys do in front of a crowd versus what you've seen in closed situations?
There can be, and a lot of it might be depending on what position they're playing. If they're in a situation more up front in the box where their role is very dependent upon the people around them, then it can be sometimes more difficult to evaluate a guy.
Maybe more for skill position.
Yeah, but about guys who are out there on one-on-one, you can see who can run around, who might beat a guy, both sides of the ball.
Is this a good final exam for spring semester for Finley to get out there? He's going to play a lot of snaps and
Yeah,
a lot on
sure,
his shoulders.
exactly. All those young guys. So for him especially, be good.
How come?
Well, he's just getting a lot of reps. I mean, being his situation, his age, just have a situation to get out there and play. And it's good. But he's had a lot of those same things all spring. But both sides of the ball, there's not been a lot of extra hats playing. So the ones and twos have been getting 98% of the work anyway, and it'll end up being in the spring game. It'll just be a little mix and match who they're doing it with.